Hello and welcome. You're listening to Start Again with Shauna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Together, we will uncover your soul's truest desires. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Start Again with Shauna Lee. Today, I am going to introduce you to my new friend, Teena. Now, listen, when I tell you that the universe works in mysterious ways, I kid you not. We met in a hot tub at the Hotel del Coronado, which is very hard for me to say, so I have to slow down when I say that title. And we hit it off immediately and started talking about some really kind of heavy topics. And there were tears and there were smiles. And one of my friends during that meeting said, "Oh my God, she should be on your podcast." So here we are, fast forward a little while later. And Teena, thank you so much for agreeing to be here today.
Great to be here and see you again.
I know, it's good to see you. So I would love for you to give a quick little intro to my audience to introduce yourself, but also the way I like to kick off these conversations is how you identify as a Start Again queen.
Okay, that's pretty easy. I think the way to start it out is that I was at a point in my life just walking down the path. This was in 2009. And it literally is like a spaceship landed and sucked me up. And these events happened to me. And 2 years later, I was plopped back in the path and looked around and said, "This looks familiar, but man, is it different." And so I think just the series of events that happened rather quickly, back to back to back for 2 years, left me standing there and starting again, not knowing that was going to be the direction I was going in.
Absolutely. And do you want to fill my audience in on what those events were?
Sure. So my sister, first off, was my best friend, and she battled breast cancer. We have kind of a family history, and she battled it for a few years, but was on a good track. And then she was out running and things became blurry, went to the eye doctor, found out she had cancer again in the other breast that the doctor hadn't taken out. And so for about a year, I spent time as much as I could with her, watching her deteriorate and die. She left 2 young girls. And after she passed in May of 2009, I really was devastated, felt like it was the end of the world. I'd lost my best friend. 3 weeks later, my mom was anemic and went into the hospital to get a transfusion, and she coded during that. And next thing you know, I'm on a plane to Michigan, and we're taking her off life support. And shortly after that, buried her. So that was in June, roughly. And then Labor Day weekend, that same year, my son was in a car accident. He was 20 years old, college student, home on Labor Day weekend. His Jeep rolled over and he suffered a brain trauma, and he passed away. And then January of that year, I thought, surely this is going to be a better year. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer and went through a year of chemo and 5 surgeries, but that was the easy part out of all that. So, so actually that's, and then in the middle of that, my husband had an iliac aneurysm, and we were at Cleveland Clinic for 7 weeks, just getting a little bit more brain traumatized through that experience.
Oh,
so,
I
so it literally was
part.
2 years. Yeah, it was 2 years of just then coming up for air and just saying, what the F and whose life is this?
Which on this podcast, you can actually say that F word. I say it freely.
Okay. Yeah, that's
because yes, all of that definitely warrants a what the fuck moment for sure. Yeah. I know you shared most of that actually when we met that evening. And I thought, holy shit, if this woman can survive all of that and come out and find a purpose and meaning to keep going and putting one foot in front of the other, then other people besides me need to hear that story.
Right.
Right. So that's the biggest reason why I asked you to come and share today.
Right.
But when you look at your story, what do you think is the most inspiring part of what I see from the outside looking in?
Well, I think that one of the things that's most inspiring, and I hesitate to even go here because I know that I was super gifted by this. So my son was able to donate all 8 of his organs, which rarely happens. And matter of fact, only 1% of the population are able to donate their organs because the perfect storm has to exist. They have to be on event. They have to have a head trauma, all these events that even if you're healthy as a horse, the universe just may not work out that way at the time of your death. So that was a huge gift to me. And I think that that's a big inspiration. I've been fortunate enough to meet or have communication with 5 of the recipients. And that almost never happens for a variety of reasons. Either the recipient feels super guilty, which was hard for me to understand because I'm thinking, okay, you got a new lease on life.
Oh,
Live.
yeah. I wouldn't have necessarily thought that either.
Right. And it's a huge thing that they just know that in order for them to live, somebody had to die. And it wasn't a choice though. So, that's one of the things that I try to inspire. One of the boys I'm super close to, Aaron's left kidney recipient, and he felt this affinity towards Aaron right away. And granted, so when I took Aaron to get his driver's license, when he was turning 16, he said, Mom, what's this organ donor question? And I was like, oh, and like, I know nothing, right? So I'm like, oh, if something happens to you, other people can use your organs. And he's like, well, Mom, why wouldn't everybody do that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe they've got religious things or, I basically know nothing.
Yes,
And
yes.
so it's just interesting that, a few years later, that 30-second conversation, came back to play. And now I know way more than maybe even I want to know. But, that was a huge gift to me because it didn't bring my son back, of course, but the fact that, for instance, in San Diego, this right now, it just ended 2 days ago, they have something called the transplant games. And it was in San Diego this year. It moves around. But Austin, the kidney recipient, went and competed in those games.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he's been doing it, for several years and meets the same person that he competed against. And so it's just a really awesome thing. But the reverence that they have for the donors, it's really incredible. But it was a gift to me because I thought from the beginning, anything good that can come out of this, guess what? I'm going to grab onto it.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
the situation sucks. So you know what? If there's something good about it, let's go for it.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. Well, I love that you have found that direction. And isn't that the way life is, where we learn way more than we want to know about a topic, but sometimes, that's what gets us up out of bed in the morning.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and so you sent me some pictures, which I will be sharing as well through social media, of the different recipients. And so the tattoo there's a picture of a tattoo, and is that of this gentleman you were just speaking of?
No, that is of the liver recipient. And he was actually a military guy, and he had Hep C, and his stomach would become so distended. He was having to go in and have just liters and liters drained out of his abdomen just to function constantly. And he got the call that there was a liver donor, and he was so sick he couldn't even hold his plaque at his retirement. They retired him from the military. He couldn't even hold it. He had to have help. And then he got Aaron's kidney. I mean, was like, where was Waldo, camping, doing all these different things. And so he got that tattoo though, in loving memory of Aaron Webster. And he said, it's all about God, country, and Aaron for me.
Oh,
And so those are the little blessings that came with It's like you sit here with your fist just clenched. And I remember being in the hospital, just going, Lord, and he looked like he's in a dentist chair. He had some dirt in his belly button from the accident, but I mean, all in all, he looked amazing, like he was just sleeping. And I'm just going, don't take him, just grasping onto my thing.
Yes, yes.
And little by little through this, I've just opened my hands and pried my fingers off. And when you do that and you live open-handedly, it's amazing what will get sent in there. You'd like to send those gifts back.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're kind of like, not so much into that.
Yeah.
But they're what get you through. Had I not received
totally.
these just amazing gifts out of the blue, I wouldn't have made it probably.
Yeah. Well, I know we feel that way often, but I'm glad you made it. And I have been, super pleased to meet you and know you and learn more about organ donation. So when I, first got my driver's license at 16, I also had the same sentiment that Erin did. I thought, why wouldn't everybody do this? And it wasn't until I started having conversations with my family and friends about the fact that I wanted to be a donor, donor. That's the word I'm looking for. That I realized a lot of people do have some hesitancy and strong feelings against it. So definitely want to bring that into our conversation as well. So give you the opportunity to talk about what you have learned and what people need to know. You said that there were some myths out there that I'd love to debunk.
Right. And I speak at a lot of schools, and we raise, how many people are organ donors? And a lot of hands shoot up, but then there's those hands that aren't. When I call on like young kids and ask them, what's stopping you? It's usually the one or two crazy movies that come out a year, like selling organs, in the black market, that sort of thing. One of the big ones, surprisingly for kids, is, well, if I'm in an accident or something happens to me, the doctors aren't going to treat me the same way. They're not going to try to help me. And the thing about that is that, like, when you go to the ERED, they don't know you're an organ donor. I mean, their job is to save your life. The organ donor thing is such a separate entity. Like the organ, wherever you're at, life share or whatever it is, they come in only when you meet that criteria of having a brain injury. These certain things have to be triggered, and then they're called. The nurses are obligated to call them in. And then, like in Erin's case, there were teams that literally flew in around the country to harvest his organs. This isn't like, your local yokel thing. They're just saying, hey, got me a heart here. Who wants it? You know what I mean? And so it's such a complicated thing. And they would come in during the process when Erin was there. It took probably 3 days that he was in the hospital, where they're making different calls and connections. And they would call and say, there was a lady in Cleveland that was going to be a good candidate for one of the lungs. And they called the doctor up, and they're like, she's just really not in a good place right now to do it. And he'd have to turn it back in. So it's a very complicated situation. And the heart they do 4D imaging, and that heart has to fit in the other person's cavity, like precisely. That's not something that's just, okay, close is good enough. So these things are very complicated. And but the great thing is that by the time we'd get through with our talks, and I'd show them some pictures like of the organ recipients, they realized that my son went out of this world a hero.
Yeah.
They want that too. Like, how many of us could go out of this world being a hero by something that we just decided to do, because it was maybe the right thing to do, or, and I understand if people don't want to do that, I totally get it, but it's like, get the facts first. And I think another thing is that a lot of times people, by just even saying that, like, mom's going to be an organ donor, we have to look at the fact that she might die someday. And that's a whole nother topic.
That's a whole different topic that
most and we're going to touch on that, hopefully. Yeah, that's a whole other topic. But so I think it's really exciting to talk about organ donation, because it's something that is like, if I talk about breast cancer, my breast cancer, everybody knows someone who's had it. Or we've had it ourselves, or we've been touched by it. And we know that there's treatments and it is what it is. But with organ donation, it's still one of those things that is untapped, and we aren't doing enough education about it.
I totally agree. I know one person in my life who is, she's a recipient of a kidney,
Mhm.
She has named her kidney and celebrates every year the receiving of this organ because it saved her life. Like
Exactly.
she has diabetes
Uh,
and desperately needed the
sure.
kidney that, and I think, gosh, I want to think how many years it's been, but I'm going to say 15 or 16 years. It's been a
Right.
long time.
Right. Kidneys
So
are pretty resilient. That's a great,
yeah.
yeah. And that's just, that's truly awesome. And I hope she's tried at least to reach out to um, her donor family because
I
it
will
can make
have
a
to
difference.
ask her.
Yeah.
I will
Because a
have
lot
to
of
ask
people
her.
don't, they just don't want to go there and they feel guilty, whatever, like I've touched on before. So, but when it
Yeah,
came
yeah.
together like that, it's like an adoption process where it's really a beautiful thing. And for me to, um, I call Austin Aaron's little kidney keeper, and to watch him grow
Oh,
up and go to
yes.
college and things like that, that I didn't, it's a gift for me. It's been a huge
Yes.
gift. It was a gift to
Yes.
him, but man, I'm
Yes.
telling you, for me to know that he still lives on in somebody, that's a huge gift for me. That changed everything.
Totally. One of my first guests on a podcast, her son died from DIPG, and I've learned a lot about grieving moms specifically who have lost a child, which is its own special kind of grief that
Yes.
it's a club no one wants to belong to. But she often says the worst thing she can think of is that people forget her son.
Yeah,
And so for her to have ways to talk about him and to have people remember him has been one of the best things for her. So I can see that kind of coming through in your story as
sure.
well.
Yeah. It's, and I don't know if we're ready to go on to the next thing I was going to say, but
Sure.
it's, one of my big realizations of this whole thing, and remember, I lost a sister with an illness, a
Mhm.
long-term illness. And then I lost my mom, from a quick illness, and
Mhm.
then this accident. And the one takeaway or the one thing I learned is that it matters how we die. And I
Mhm.
came up with this point system kind of,
Oh,
because
yes, I forgot about this. Yes, please
yeah,
tell everyone about this.
well, and it's not, the numbers change every time I say it. This is not like in
Sure.
stone. So, but it's, as a society, we really suck at grief and death.
Yes, we
We
do.
really don't want to step into that space. And so, I developed this point system though. So it's like when my sister died, it was super sad because she was young. She left
Mhm.
kids behind. So she's
Mhm.
maybe like a 70 on the scale, And then
Mhm.
my mom died and, she was 71 and people are like, that's really sad and whatever, but she's maybe 50. And, and then Aaron died and that's the loss of a kid. And that's the
Right.
worst. We all can imagine that. And I'm
Yep.
here to tell you, it's 100 times worse than even what we could have imagined.
Yep.
So that gives you like a 90 on the scale, 95. I mean, you can't get a whole lot unless you lost twins or something in an accident. I mean, it can certainly get worse, but you're pretty high up there on a scale. A
Yep.
kid in the middle of college or a young kid in elementary school, you're just going to get a lot of points out of that. And people are going to walk with you a little bit longer
Mhm.
in that because it's higher up on the point scale. You lose a grandparent and you're probably not going to get a card in the mail. Maybe one, maybe two. How old were
Mhm.
they? They were sick. We rationalize it in our mind.
Yep.
They're old and they, whatever, even if that grandparent maybe raised me, or maybe that grandparent was the rock of my earth. You know what I mean? It
Yep.
doesn't really matter as far as the people around you. A
Yes. And
spouse,
this,
they're going to be a little bit lower, and it matters how they died. And so that's kind of my point system. And point in case, my niece Jenna was my sister's daughter, and she was in
Mhm.
middle school. And so I spent a lot of time out there before and after. And that's even one of the reasons why we moved out to San Diego after my sister died, because they lived out there. And one day Jenna says to me after school, she said, Aunt Tina, nobody cares that mom died. It had been
Mm.
maybe 3 months. And I said, what are you talking about?
Oh, wow.
Course they care. And she goes, no, I mean, they don't. No one ever brings it up. They don't talk about it. They don't anything. And I said, well, Jenna, I mean, I know you're confused. So I started talking to some of the moms because I had to drive her to friends' houses and things like that. And one of the shocking things to me was that the moms had all told their kids, don't bring it up to Jenna. Don't say
Yep.
anything about her mom. You don't want to get her sad, whatever.
Yep.
And when I told the moms what that sounded like to Jenna, what that felt like,
Yes.
they were shocked. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
all these realizations though of just like, gosh, even as adults, we really suck at this.
We really suck at this. And
Yes.
I had the same exact conversation with Melissa when she lost her son. She said, there's this idea, and it is in this society, the way we grieve very poorly, that we are afraid to bring up the person who died. We don't want to mention their name because we don't want the person to be sad. And she's like, I'm going to be sad either way.
Right.
I
Believe me.
desperately want to talk about my son, and it makes me feel better to do that.
Right.
And it was, and that's one of the reasons I was really glad she came on the podcast, and to have this avenue to help educate other people and to let them know that the hurtfulness and the damage it causes to not talk about them, even though everyone means well and they think they're doing the right thing, it in fact is the opposite of what that person needs.
Right. And when I talk at schools, I try to bring that up a lot with kids.
Mhm.
And kids are smart. They will raise their hand and say, I had a friend last year that's dad died. What can I do? And they really want to know. And so it's a
Yep.
great opportunity with young people that I try to say, number one, realize how long this journey is.
Yes.
You don't really start even feeling it. Like, even as I'm talking to you now, I really say, is this my life? I mean, I feel like I'm fucking lying because this can't possibly be my life.
Yes.
Like, it's
Yes.
almost feels out of body, even this many years out of it. I can't believe this
Yeah.
is my story, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's, so I try to talk about just the length, because we get really bored as a society too. And it's like, oh my gosh, are they still going to talk about Johnny forever?
Yeah.
Um,
And turns out, yes, they are.
Right. Yeah. And we're going to think about them, and we're going to,
Yes.
right. We're going to do that. So that's kind of my big surprise, if you would say, about how I didn't realize how bad we suck. And it's kind of like that one subject in class that you're really, really bad at. Like for me, it was math. And so you always avoid it. I had so many people that come up, I'm so sorry I didn't go to your son's funeral. I just couldn't handle, it would be too sad. I couldn't do it. And I'm like going, I didn't want to go either. I don't care.
I didn't want to be there.
I didn't want to be there. It's the last place I wanted to be. And so it doesn't matter. But so a lot of people rise up that you don't expect, that you get in your life, like even people that are willing to kind of enter that space.
Yeah.
And then the people that you really thought would be there for the long haul aren't. And that's
Aren't.
okay. It feels like, you walk into a room and maybe you have a bunch of those pickup sticks. Remember those from when you were a kid?
Yes.
And you trip and they go all over the place.
Yes.
And you don't have a lot of energy, and you pick up the ones just every day you try to pick up one or two, but there is some under the couch that you'll never go back and get. So there's going to be people that you let go of, or things that you let go of. And so you might just have a small little bundle you hang on to, and it might be all new, but it is what it is. And that's kind of how you get through.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of my next questions I was going to ask you, was what the most surprising challenge was that you faced.
Yeah.
So what do you think your answer is to how you overcame that? Like, what's your strategy? What's your approach?
Yeah. Well, I think, I do think when you have something you can turn it into, like for me, the organ donation was a natural thing. And I think the big surprise was just how bad that we suck about it. And that I do try to educate people. I can't change the whole society, but one person at a time. I try any chance that I can. And I do something I call grief walking. And that's kind of if you ask the direction I go. I have a lot of people that over the past have come in my life, or they happen, and I walk with them. And because even if you go to a counselor, I've got a friend right now that she said, number one, I went and she lost somebody in the military, her son. And so she went to the military therapist that they provide. And they're like, number one, he looks 15. And number two, I don't think he's lost a pet toad. And so, sometimes, like you said earlier, the sheer fact that that I'm still standing, I have skin on, sometimes that's enough for a person to look at me when they're desperate like that and they look at it and they just say, okay, if you're telling me I can make it, if you've made
Yep.
it, maybe I can. But you get texts, like in the middle of the night saying, I can't breathe. I don't think I can go on,
Yes.
whatever. And if you can just get them through to the next,
Yep.
whatever that is, and then gently just try to help them pry one finger at a time so that they don't miss out on these surprise things that drop in. You don't want to miss out on that either,
Yeah, totally. Totally. And yes, there is absolute value in someone else seeing your struggle and what you did with it. And that's not to say everyone's going to go on to help people grieve or talk about organ donation, but like my friend who lost her son, she went on to raise money for the Cure Starts Now, which is specifically pediatric cancer, and raising money to help fund. Like she did something with that.
I'm saying it could be anything. I have another friend
Yeah.
that lost her son, and they organize an annual beach cleanup because he was a big surfer.
Oh,
I'm
I
not
love
saying it's got to
that.
be huge. It's just got to be
No.
something where friends have a place to come out and share their story, share, because it's that one thing that somebody says like, oh, I ran across this picture
Mhm.
of your person or something like that, where it is, in her case, it's the not forgetting.
Absolutely.
Because it is such a lonely journey, because even if you lost the same kid, like my husband and I lost the same kid, and man, did we do it differently.
Yep.
And
Oh,
you
that is such a good point. In fact, I want to ask your opinion. This isn't in my questions, so
Sure.
tell me if you're not comfortable talking about this. But one of the things I read about grieving parents specifically is so many of them end up divorced. And I think the reason that piqued my interest is obviously my work has been in divorce recovery. And where am I going with this question? I was just wondering kind of your take on that, because you said what I think is at the core of that is that people grieve so differently, even if it's the same person who was lost. And I feel like that's probably where that disconnect starts happening. But what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I would have assumed, I knew someone when I was younger, first married, that had lost a child, and they ended up getting divorced. And I said, and this child had drowned in a pool. And I thought, I wonder if they blame each other, or like, one was supposed to be watching, whatever. And I kind of always assumed maybe that was it a little bit. We blamed each other for something or whatever, but it is about the path, and you each have to go through and walk the fire alone. And as a matter of fact, I went to a grief share group. And what that is, you're sitting in a group and you watch these videos every week. And that's another way that I found out that I have two conflicting thoughts right now. So I'll kind of I'm getting tangled in that. But they show you a video, and we had someone that lost their brother, and a husband. And the question was, do you feel like there's anybody rushing you to get back on the horse quicker? So we go around the room, and I said, yeah, I feel like it's my husband. I mean, I can't get off the couch, and he's just telling me what I need to do. And I need to get back. I need to do this. I need to do that. Erin had a girlfriend, and she needed to get back in school. She had a full scholarship, and she ended up moving in with us and sleeping in his old bedroom because she just couldn't breathe, and took time off school. And, but he was telling us how to do it, how we needed to grieve. And it made me angry, for one thing. But then, so here's my other conflicting thought. So the leader of this group said to me, you need to honor your husband. You don't know how lucky you are to have a husband. Mine, because hers has died.
Yes.
And then I realized, oh yeah, like losing a husband isn't the same as losing a kid, and we don't get each other. And she didn't mean to, she couldn't help herself.
Yeah.
But that triggered for her the fact that I was talking negative about him, in her opinion.
Yes. And all she wanted was to bring her husband back.
Yeah. And so that was another way I realized, like, oh my gosh, this has so many different facets of grief. Is not created equal. It is not. But it's about the path. And it's about like me being pissed off at him telling me how to do it. And then me feeling like he's judging me for what I am or not doing. And then he decided that he's kind of a workaholic, but he decided he was going to start doing triathlons. Well, then he did start doing triathlons, and he got the irregular heart. And that's how he ended up at Cleveland Clinic for 7 weeks, because he got this tearing in this whole thing. So it's about, I think, that we do different paths, but it's
Yeah.
also that if I tell you, when I was sucked up by the alien spaceship and then dropped back
Yes.
and going like, where the hell am I? And this is so different. You just become such a different person. Like, just, you are not the same person. And so to
Yeah.
expect to be the same, him the same, me the same, whatever, you just aren't.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can still become and be your greatest cheerleaders and stuff. And sometimes it just doesn't work anymore because you're
Yeah.
just different.
Yeah.
That's
It's
my
interesting
opinion.
that's helpful. Thank you. It's interesting that you said, all grief is not created equal. I actually have a chapter in my book. It's about like recovering after divorce and rebuilding your life. But
Sure.
I have an entire chapter devoted to grief, because I think, and it kind of ties back to your point system. There's this idea that, well, I'm sad because I got a divorce, and that's not the same as someone else who is grieving the loss of someone who actually died, right?
Mhm.
And so kind of my point in this book was, grief is grief.
Yes.
And there's a lot of similarities, and it isn't about calculating whose is worse than another's. It's that
Exactly.
you are dealing with some sort of a loss, and how do you do that as a person? How do you walk that path and get through that? So that's interesting. It kind of pulled back both of your different stories. Okay, so to shift gears slightly,
Just
unless
one quick thing.
yes.
When I was in a Bible study, actually, right after Aaron died, and there was a woman going through a kind of a nasty divorce. And, I felt like she and I related
Mhm.
almost more closely than a lot of other, for whatever reason. And you're right, the loss. Somehow she kept saying, I know mine's not as bad as yours, but we
Yes.
were so in tune, in sync with that grief, that was another thing that surprised me, is
Yes.
that though it's not all created equal, there can
Mm-mm.
be super similarities just based on the openness of where you're at right that moment and the pain that you're
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've tried, just learning from, I've watched more of my friends lose a child than I would like to admit, and watching that process. And now, as I'm getting older, there's friends are starting to lose their parents. And so watching people grieve the loss of a loved one that comes from death, and seeing how many people follow this similar process when they get a divorce, that's where I started drawing those similarities and realizing it's not surprising at all for me to hear you say that the two of you kind of saw eye to eye, because it's more about the process and the path and how you are grieving. That is, I think that's most helpful. But
Yeah.
basically giving, and we all want to minimize, oh, mine isn't as bad as someone else's,
Right.
without just giving ourselves credit for the fact that we are experiencing a loss of some sort that
Right.
warrants a grieving process.
Exactly.
Anyhow.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is, so you've been, abducted by aliens and put down in this life, and you're like, how the hell is this my life?
Yeah.
And you have the gift of hindsight at this point. If you were to look back at the younger you and give her advice, what would you say?
Yeah, that's really tough, because I think if I had known what I was going to go through, I would have jumped. I just would have said, no way, man, I'm not doing that. And I probably would
Mhm.
have done it. So, I'd like to say, um, maybe be more prepared. I think it really helps if we have posses in our life, that we are willing to step in with people and not avoid, if we can go the distance with people, no matter what they're going through, versus just, it doesn't fit my timeline right now or whatever. So, I think if I was younger, and usually you're so busy, you can't do that. And you do life and you just do the fun things, you're going to the sports events
Yeah.
and you're doing this, but it is like someone losing a parent. And instead of being that one that you just text and say, hey, if you need anything, blah, 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 but maybe step 1 inch farther in than that,
Mhm.
maybe 2 inches. And maybe you
Mhm.
go for the long haul. Maybe you're the only person 6 months from now that just say, how are you doing? Let's go to lunch and talk about
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm.
it wouldn't have really entered my mind to do that. If they called me, I certainly would have done it. But I
Yes.
didn't know what I know now, as far as the pain that loss causes. Like, I remember going
Yes.
shopping for like one of the first times after Aaron died. Like, it'd been weeks, but I touched a blouse and it physically hurt my fingertips.
Mhm.
That's how bad the pain hurt. Like, I didn't know pain that, there could be that kind of physical pain. And
Yep.
so there are a lot of people going out with that, and we don't want to go there. We don't want to bother them. We don't want to upset them. We don't want to what, I don't know, but I think we should try.
Yes. Well, and if I've learned anything, and I have learned a lot about the ways that I can support someone else who's grieving better than I had in the past, because I've made a lot of mistakes as well. And there was one particular funeral, I literally kick myself and will for the rest of my life that I did not go, because I was that person who said,
Yeah.
I can't handle that. And look, now I have attempted to make up for lost time, because I learned how important it was to continue showing up. And this friend of mine is way nicer to me than I deserve, but she has said that my continuing to be there was
Right.
more helpful to her
Yes.
than had I been there in the moment, that she was in such a fog. She says,
Right.
I can't tell you who was there or who wasn't there.
That's
So
exactly right.
like continuing, she will tell me continuing to beat myself up over that isn't helpful, but that that's my lesson, is that there are ways that we can show up for people.
Right.
And it's not about saying the right thing, because newsflash, there's not a thing to say that makes it better.
Right.
Like, there's not a perfect thing, but to be there and say, how can I be with you today? And just to show up, because I see everyone say the same thing. Oh, let me know how I can help.
Right.
And my advice to those people who are saying that is, they don't know how you can help. So
Right.
you just need to show up and do whatever is on your heart that feels like the kind, gentle thing to do to support your friend. Because I don't think there's a lot of wrong things that we can say, and plenty of people do say those.
Yeah.
What is the top one that comes to mind for you? The wrong thing to say?
Well, if I could, without being specific, because I can be specific if you want, but I think it's one, don't over ask, unless you're a detective and you need to be asking those questions. And I've had friends that have their kid has been murdered. I've had lots of different people I've walked with.
Yeah.
But don't ask, don't say, do you think he was texting and driving? Do you think it's none of your business? If they want to share with you, they will. So don't ask.
Yes. I like that. That's good.
And another one is don't overshare. We want people to think, we want them to know we relate. So we're going to share about my cousin's auto accident 20 years ago so that you can relate, and you're re-traumatizing this person's brain. Like, my brain had gone through all kinds of trauma, witnessing my son's stuff.
Yep.
So when you show up and tell me about a cousin 20 years ago that their car rolled 5 times, my brain has to hear that and process it, and I don't have room for it. You're actually creating more trauma in someone's brain. So those are the things. One of the funnier things I thought, like, I had a lot of people say, well, God really needed another angel, by taking Aaron. And I'm thinking, we are all in deep shit if God couldn't do this without Aaron. I love my Aaron. He's a character. I mean, whatever, but if God was in that much trouble that he needed my kid, we are all super duper in trouble,
Yes. Yes.
So I think one of the best things, so I called a friend and I told her what happened, and she showed up at my doorstep and she said, Teena, I don't know what to say. And I said, Ann, I don't know what to say. And that was the best thing she could have said, was I don't know what to say, because I didn't know what to say. And so we just stood, we hugged, and that was it. That's all we needed.
Yeah. They're magic words, I tell you, because I think everyone wants to know, like, the magic phrase, like, what can I say to make it better? And there isn't.
No,
there isn't. But just saying, I don't know what to say, and just showing up is the value.
And it doesn't matter if it's a plate of brownies. It doesn't matter if it's a card. We're not keeping score. It's just, and it's more important later, like about 6 weeks in, 12 weeks in, people are back to their normal life, and there's no more cards coming in. There's no more anything. And that's when you really realize that you're alone. 6 weeks out, you're going, oh crap. I mean, because all the preparations are done. You've picked up ashes. You've done all that business. And now you've got to walk through that fire. And so, and it really helps to have, I've found somebody like me in your life where you're a step ahead, and you can say you're doing okay. So if you've experienced something like that, then use that talent, because, and I've put people together before that I thought lived in the same town or something like that, said, could you just show up for them? And sometimes it's just text buddies that is the perfect thing because, I've got one guy right now that will text me and just, he's on the fringe. And to just say, you know what, did you get out of bed this morning? Yeah, I did. Gosh, you're doing great. Sometimes that's enough.
Well, and you just brought up something that I think is really important. Again, people tend to minimize their own experiences and think, well, I'm not fully healed. How can I possibly help someone?
Right.
But just being one step ahead of where someone is
Exactly. With
is
skin
so
on.
valuable.
Yes.
Yes. You're like, well, heck, if you've made just that much improvement, maybe like sometimes that's all that someone can fathom for their survival is what that very next step looks like. So there's a lot of value in there.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question I have for you is, where are you going from here? What's next for you?
I don't know. I kind of blow in the wind. Things like this open up like for me. And I really do think it's a universe thing where, I can't even tell you the stories that happen, but I really just do my education thing and I'm doing the one person at a time. I would love to write a book, but then I'm like, who would want to read it? I mean, that's the other voice, but I'm going like, seriously, I wouldn't want to read it. It's one of those things that
the people you should absolutely write a book. And it's the people who are steps behind you that would read that book.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the direction I'm going then. Maybe this is.
I love that.
Okay, good. We just worked out my future.
There you go. There you go. It's just the next step forward. It's just,
there we go.
I always say baby steps are better than no steps.
Yes.
We don't need to know where the path is leading. We just need to know how to take the very next step.
Yep. And
that's awesome.
You can't undermine that. That's that's a beautiful lesson.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I am going to venture to guess that some people are going to want to have you come speak to an organization of theirs or somehow get in touch with you. So how can people find you?
Well, I'm not super on social media, but I do have a Facebook page and I do have an Instagram and I have an email. So do you want me to say those or do you want to post them later or what?
I will include all the links in the show notes to each of those places so that people can totally find you. And that's amazing because I know without a doubt there's going to be some sort of connection that's made after this particular episode. And I would like to help facilitate that.
Well, I hope so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
we need to change the society one person at a time.
We do. We totally do. And I think this is a very good start. And I am so appreciative of your time. And I'm so pleased that I met you in that hot tub.
Yes. Right. That's totally a God thing. So thank you for that.
It totally was. So thank you again for being here today.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, listen. Are you struggling to find what your true purpose really is? You should try journaling. At the very least, it will get you to a better feeling place than where you are right now. I've created a set of journal prompts to get you on your way to discovering who you truly are and where you want to go from here. My free download is called Journal Yourself to Joy, and it's available at shaunalee.com under Free Stuff. These are my tried and true journal prompts that will raise your energy, increase your positivity, and brighten your day. Download yours today.